Hello, hello, and welcome to all of our listeners. For today's episode, we are going to change things up a little bit just to close out the year. And so I have invited an essential part of our podcast production really team. He really runs the show. This is Graham Gardner from Model FA. Graham, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And so we really want to focus the content on today's episode for anybody who's listening that might be a part of an RIA firm and thinking about why and how you would create podcast content. And so just to open up the hood a little bit and show you kind of where we are, Tricord, we have been trying to evolve and improve and get better and better at our podcast and how we share our content over different platforms. But it is a big task and there are a lot of different facets to it. And so it just occurred to me that some of our listeners out there might be interested to hear how we do it, where we are in our learning process, and they might maybe be able to find some nuggets. But Graham, certainly from you, because I know you're an expert in this industry. So do you want to kick us off by sharing a little bit about what you do and who Model FA is?
Yeah, I love that. So again, my name is Graham Gardner. I work with a company called Model FA, stands for Model Financial Advisor. We are a coaching company where we come in and we help financial advisors create more efficient practices, implement marketing and business development systems. I've worked with financial advisors specifically since 2018, and I help people, like I said, implement efficient marketing systems, growth systems that are repeatable for their companies and allow them to scale and not focus on, what should we do tomorrow? More so like know that they have a plan. I don't know if
Yeah.
I've answered the question, but
I
that's
think
who
you
we are.
I think you have, and I think you've taken a fairly humble approach. Like when I stepped into this firm, we had a history of doing some marketing things, but we needed to sort of bring it into kind of a modern day setting and think through, go back through that exercise of like, who's our target audience? How are we trying to reach them? How is it best to reach them? And so even though today's episode is primarily about the podcast production and how we develop the content and just kind of timeline and things like that, really, Graham, our time working together started earlier from that. We started with, I like to think of the cake analogy. We had to build out our SEO optimized website, which you did for us. And I learned so much along the purpose of having an SEO optimized website. That's another podcast altogether. Building a Google business profile. We are still working on that, but just how that benefits in terms of driving new contacts. We've worked on the social media layer together, and actually we'll touch on that when we talk about the podcast, utilizing some of the clips from the long form content that you can use across social media platforms. So your expertise is vast and deep, I would say, across the industry. So
Thank you.
yeah, you definitely have a lot to offer. You also have your own podcast.
Yeah, I launched my own podcast a few months ago called Mostly Business,
Right.
where, we mostly talk about business, but you're also likely to see my poodle Frank in some episodes, who he's probably going to make a guest appearance in this if I had to know
Perfect.
Frank. But yeah, I decided I've helped advisors and other business owners create their own podcasts and YouTube shows for years. It was time that I finally launched my own, and I've learned
Right.
a ton. I'm like 8 or 9 episodes in, and it's definitely a whole new learning experience being in the driver's seat.
Right. So furry friends are always welcome. But let's dive in. I think the first question I just wrote down was like, why? Why a podcast? Like people are getting media. There's saturation in terms of news and articles, especially in financial services. There's so much information out there. We oftentimes tell our clients the issue now that they face is not the lack of information. It's that when you go to type in Roth conversion, you're going to get a tidal wave of information. How do you decipher? So if you were working with a new RIA and they were asking you like, why, what's the purpose of having a podcast channel? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think that there's really a few key points as to why having a podcast or a show on YouTube makes sense. Like I personally think of those two things as the same long form piece of content, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be audio only or if you implement the video aspect like we're doing today. I think that number one, if you're selling any kind of service where your expertise is ultimately the service, meaning you're not selling a t-shirt or a donut,
Right.
getting a chance to sit down and record a long form piece of content and really dive into issues and prove your expertise and help people figure things out on their own and guide them along until they're at the buying point where they want, like, hey, maybe I actually need help beyond what I've been able to implement on my own. The podcast is a great way to demonstrate that expertise over a period of time.
Yeah.
Additionally, I think that it's a great way to reservice the current clients that you have. Education is a huge part in financial services of creating happy clients. And by doing a podcast, again, you dive deep into subjects and you're able to distribute this stuff out to your own clients, stay
Yep.
in front of them. Because as we know, it feels like everybody's got a podcast right now. So if
Right.
you're not serving this content up to your own clients, other people are. So
Right.
it's very important aspect of that.
I have definitely found that to be true. Like, there's been several meetings now where we work also internally on referral marketing, which is near and dear and really driven in the industry by Model FA. And as we sit down with our clients, you start that process of referral marketing with asking them for feedback. What has your experience been? How could we improve? And so we've actually incorporated some of this content creation in that process to say, like, hey, have you had a chance to, check out any of our podcasts? And oh no, I didn't even know you had one. So it either opens a conversation or then we get to show them, some of our clips, and it might be related to a conversation or a topic piece that we just went over in our meeting, or it's giving them some sort of material that makes it easier for them to refer us. So, oh yeah, as they look over the content piece, like, oh yeah, I have a buddy that's super like confused about social security, and I think they're getting kind of close to retirement. Like, maybe I could send them that piece. And then, so, it's interesting to say, like, kind of establishing your expert voice. And I think you even said kind of you learn as you go, which I have found 100% to be true. I'm the newest advisor, the new kid on the block around here. And having to prepare for the podcast is just another reason, accountability every week to dive into a topic, make sure I'm well researched, as best as possible, bring an agenda to the podcast that is meaningful, because there is so much content out there. It's like, what are you really saying that's different or unique, or the way you deliver it, et cetera. That's the challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really cool too, like talking about having the shorts and things when, like, there's times I've referenced people out to one of your guys' shorts, or I have a client, Tim, that talks about certain issues that I'm constantly sending to my buddies at the gym when they're like, business owners have questions like, oh, actually I have a client that just recorded something on this. And the referability, the natural referral you can make out to other people. It's a lot
Yeah.
easier for me to send one of my friends a clip of something that I'm aware of, if you were my financial advisor, versus like some long drawn out written email. It's like, well, what do I even
Right.
say in that?
Right. Or newsletter. Like, the thing about video, is that they get a sense of personality and how people work together. And I love that because the next thing I want to talk about is kind of format. And when I think of format, I think of a couple different things. Like, one is the actual like physical format. Like, we have tested in our office the sort of like talk show format where we're sitting on the couch and, the cup of coffee and that kind of thing. We have currently landed at this format, which is everybody records separately from their computer, which has given us an easier ability to invite guest participants like you. We don't live in the same state, and so it's just as easy to log into this platform. But format can really be all encompassing. So you mentioned YouTube. Can we talk about platforms? Like, if you're recording long form content, what sort of platforms do you need to, where do you need to be posting that content?
Yeah, I think there's a few like superstar platforms, and then there's other like backfill platforms that we want to hit. So we distribute podcasts using a service called Libsyn, but you can also use Spotify has a service as well that using a RSS feed will distribute your podcast out for you. So you sign up for, let's just say, Libsyn or Spotify, and then you connect in all the other podcast platforms like Apple and Amazon. So think about just where commonly you see podcasts advertised, like the big major ones. And say you want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure your podcast goes out on Apple, Spotify, and then Amazon Music in terms of the audio. There's a bunch of other, like I said, secondary type platforms that are out there. There's probably like 100 different platforms you could submit them on, but I think those three audio wise are the key ones. And then
Hmm.
I don't see any reason not to do YouTube as well.
Right.
If you're going to take the effort to sit down and record something on here, it's just as easy for us to flip on our webcam. We're going to have a more
Right.
natural conversation because I'm looking at you right
Right.
now. I can
Maybe you gotta
see.
like touch up the makeup, do the hair for the day, right, Graham?
Yeah, yeah, do the hair. Yeah, that's a big problem for me.
Looking
Uh,
good.
this is a recent look for me, so that hurts my soul a little. That I just committed to this.
It's looking good. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, there's a
Uh,
little bit more preparation. Maybe you're a little bit more concerned about like what's going on in your background, what's on your
yeah,
show. But for the most part, right, like what you said, if you're going to the effort to record it on video, you might as well get it out there. And YouTube, didn't you tell me the other day it's like the second largest search engine, right?
yeah,
Is
that's a
that right?
stat we've heard thrown around for years. I recently heard maybe TikTok took over as the second largest, which I don't know if
Okay.
that's really the same thing, but I'm not, I haven't verified that. But yeah, the great thing about putting on YouTube is there's really like two different YouTubes. There's where you go to get your classic YouTube video. It can be, 10 or 60 minutes long, but now there's also YouTube Shorts, and those are very much served up in a different way than the classic videos.
And
So
I would have never thought of YouTube Shorts had you not suggested it. I mean, I had seen it. I hadn't really played around with it too much before you were like, what's kind of an untapped general. It's not totally untapped, but for financial services, there's very few people utilizing YouTube Shorts, and you've been able to help. Like we record the long form content, you grab clips from that and post it to YouTube Shorts for us. I'm making what you do sound quick and easy. I know you put a lot of effort into it, but it's been really fun because there's good takeaways from that, like what clips have gotten more views than others, and it's just anyways, awesome.
yeah, well, I mean, to highlight something you said there, like I don't want to undersell what I do. I think, I try hard. I feel like I do a great job on things, but
You do.
it's not the hardest thing in the world to grab clips out of a video or to sit
Mm-hmm.
down and record something and put a bumper on the front and back. Like I think the cost for starting a podcast and being able to get something out there, I mean, it's zero. You can
Right.
Everyone's got a headset for the most part that you probably wear at the gym.
Yep.
You can just record using the native recording app on your computer.
Yep.
Uh, Going in and doing this stuff itself, like you don't have to be the world's greatest editor. And most of these tools have an AI option that I'd say is 80-90% as good as what if somebody manually sits down and does.
And it's
Uh,
only going to get better. I mean,
oh,
I mean, like you played with, so let's just, kind of again, like look behind the curtain here a little bit. We have like a pretty basic setup here, right? We don't record in a professional studio or anything like that. We have some lights that we use in the individual offices. We use Yeti mics, but I'm about ready to get rid of this headset in the new year. It's my New Year's resolution. We record on Riverside FM. That grabs all the content. You can use that on your side for editing purposes. We download the audio file that's still published on radio, and you work with the video content. But I was going to say something else in terms of the formatting. Oh, but I mean, we could definitely upgrade our equipment. We have not spent tens of thousands of dollars on our equipment. It is fairly low cost. And I think it generates an okay quality. It doesn't look like we're like high professional, like I said, not a professional studio. I would say we're somewhere in the middle. You have more experience. So how would you kind of judge like equipment and how much do people really need to invest to have like a good quality podcast?
yeah, I'd say a mic's important. Having
Mm-hmm.
a good quality mic. There are common ones that you see people use would either be a Yeti, which you can get
Mm-hmm.
for $80 to $100, depending on if they're in sale or not. Commonly, the off colors will be on sale for like $60, so not a very high cost of entry there.
Yep.
Another common one you'll see is the Shure. I'm not using mine at the moment because it's not on this computer, but it's a very common mic. You'll see podcasters use the Shure. Has
Okay.
like It's a great quality, but again, I'm just right now using the headset on my, that I wear to the gym, and
Nice.
using just an Adobe, hitting an AI button that cleans up the audio will greatly enhance what I sound like in the final
Right.
production. So
Right.
so again, going back to like the cost entry if you want to do something like this. Like ideally using a Riverside account, which Laura just mentioned, you
Mm-hmm.
could get the $30 a month Riverside account, which is their mid-tier account. And the AI ability that's built into there is it's probably good enough for launching a podcast. You might have to go back
Yep.
and adjust a little bit of the AI editing that it does, but in
Right.
terms of just being able to say, "Hey, I'm gonna get 20 episodes out over X amount of time. That's my commitment. I'm not gonna worry about, do I have the world's best mic or what's my studio look like? I'm just gonna start with doing the thing, and then I
Right.
can always improve from there." You're spending like $30 on something like Riverside. And I think
Right.
the real key with Riverside is that it gives you the AI editing built in with that $30 account that you need if you're not a professional marketer. And then also the cool thing with Riverside, I could be at the park right now using my cell phone, and Riverside records in a way where the files get stored locally and then get uploaded. So you have the highest quality recording possible, and you're not trying to shuffle around big, large files between you
Right.
and the editor or anything. It's just all right here on the Riverside platform.
It
So
is so convenient. We had guests log in, and it's really, I would say, yeah, super easy, straightforward, minor, if any, technical issues. And AI is a really good segue into content creation. So here on Riverside.fm, where we record, Graham, you played around with. They had an AI generated version of my voice. I think in I mean, it's already the technology is already there. We just don't utilize it. But in a short period of time, I could essentially deliver content or an outline into AI, and it could utilize my image and my voice to record a podcast. Like I might not actually physically have to do it every week. And it blows the mind, but it's
Laura,
there.
I just found out my cousin does an AI podcast. He uses a different tool for audio.
Wild.
He's got a great background in video, and he told me he's a faceless podcast where he only uses his face like very rarely. But he's got apparently a full podcast with thousands of subscribers to it that he
Isn't
was
that
telling me about this
crazy?
past weekend. Yeah, it's
So that question is like, are you AI right now? Or how do I really know that I'm talking to Graham?
uh, it couldn't reproduce Frank, so I'll make sure Frank the Poodle comes in
Yes,
here at some
exactly.
point.
Frank the Doodle, I love it. Well, the other thing you encouraged me to use AI, and we'll kind of segue into like how we utilize the long form content and we create content. So here internally for me, when I kind of took the reins of trying to develop the podcast on a weekly basis, I do it in collaboration with the other advisors here. I try to map out about a quarter at a time, and I get input. Sometimes we have a little brainstorming session. Sometimes I just get inspired and can write multiple topics. Sometimes they're related. Sometimes we do a series. Really, I try to keep the methodology of who are we talking to, who's our target audience, kind of that, attract, nurture, sell sort of funnel. In general, keep that in mind. And so we take that long form content, we map it out on a quarterly basis, we record, you generate clips from that, which we can use on social media. I have used AI to create outlines for a subject matter, and I have used AI for the on a regular basis for like the captions for the social media, because one of the things I'm in the midst of learning is not to necessarily just duplicate the captions across all the social media platforms. You want similar content. And so AI will generate kind of different versions, iterations of a similar style topic. It is crazy easy.
That point is so great, Laura. Like, I guess it's something I've been aware of, but I've never put that thought together about how, like, yeah, there's AI tools that I've used for shorts and stuff before, and you'll see like basically three versions of the same short in there, but they're slightly different. And
Mm-hmm.
that works well because if you're ever out on, there's been times I'm on Facebook and then I jump over to LinkedIn and I'll see the same company stuff and it's the same exact thing. That's not the best look. You didn't put in
Yeah,
all this effort to then drop the ball, like the final last step.
right. And it is different. Like I'm learning as you've started me on this journey that the logarithm on LinkedIn is different from the logarithm on Instagram. So it's going to promote and enhance content differently. And so you have to kind of learn the name of the game. And you have to kind of take the emotions out of it, right? Like, unfortunately, social media can cause all of us pause because it is kind of a vulnerable space, right? Like, you're putting yourself out there. I don't know why podcasts and long form content seem to be a little bit more forgiving, maybe because you have more time to explain yourself. I don't know. Social media seems like to me, it's a vulnerable space. And so I had to really extract the emotions, like, why did this reel do better than that reel? And, or why did this post? And so a lot of it is educating myself on the logarithms and how to play the game. One big aha that you gave me was that, like, LinkedIn has a tendency to promote content over time. So potentially you don't need to post as frequently. I know there's people that would say otherwise, but maybe you don't have to post as frequently on LinkedIn, especially if you have great performance on something that you've posted. Like, let it simmer, let it marinate, and it will continue to grow over time. What else would
Yeah,
you say in terms of the different platforms?
yeah. So on that front, just to give context there, this is something I picked up on years ago, and it served me so well on the LinkedIn platform. When you post something in the first like 48 hours, it's super important to get as many likes and comments and support from, your close circle of 10 to 20 people that you can reach out and be like, hey, I need you to like this thing. It's super important in my business. It's like if something gets that interaction on LinkedIn that first 48 hours, then it just promotes it
Boom.
to everybody. If
Yep.
it doesn't, it's like nobody ever sees the thing. My dad's an engineer and runs business development for a pretty large engineering firm, and he'll constantly like call me up, like, "Did you see the thing I posted?" Because he wants to know, like, is the algorithm picking it up? I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I just liked it for you because I've gotten so trained on this, and
Yeah.
it has made a huge impact in his business for
Yes.
that."
There are people in the RIA space doing exceptionally well on LinkedIn, especially for lead generation. And for some, I still think it feels like the wild, wild west. They're not quite ready, or they're not, compliance sometimes serves as this kind of like dark cloud. But when you're just showing up to share general information, we're not talking about guaranteed performance results or anything like that. You steer clear of any of those topics. You're just sharing broadly on some education points. And I think it's also a great space on LinkedIn to share a little bit about your personality, maybe your family, if you feel comfortable. People like to see that. They like to kind of know, because this industry specifically is shifting more towards the relationship side of the business and how important that is. So I think people want to know kind of the personality behind the firm.
Yeah, have you picked up on the podcast? I know you said some of your clients say like, "Hey, I didn't know you had a podcast," but have you found it is something that helps advance relationships and create conversations with clients as you've become a member of the podcast
Yeah.
team?
Yeah, no, I think, there's some clients that, the firm has been around for 40 years. And so literally my dad started recording on an AM station on the radio. I think this 17 years ago. And I'm surprised at how many people say, "Oh yeah, I was listening to your dad for years on the radio," and cracks me up. And it's difficult for any RIA out there to listen to this. It's different. It's difficult to track ROI directly because it's not a one for one, and there are people who paid for advertisements on all those various platforms. We have not really stepped into that yet. But in terms of establishing a voice, credibility, frequency of being out there, personality, again, I'm kind of the new kid on the block around here. So I think there's a lot of our existing clients that have known my dad for many years and came in feeling like they already knew a lot about me. But that was because all of a sudden my voice started appearing on this content that they've been listening to for years, and it felt familiar to them. So for that
Yeah.
reason, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think seeing your growth in it has been super awesome. You from day one, I think I told you, like on the first episode you recorded, I'm like, okay, your floor is so much higher than so many
Oh,
people that I've seen do this. So it's been really cool to watch your growth. Uh,
wow.
I,
Thank
I, I s-
you.
I see we're coming up close to time, but I want to make sure I get these 2 points in. So
Yeah.
I think that if you're someone that is considering like why would I do a podcast? Like we kind of briefly talked about the showing your knowledge on things and then advancing relationships with current clients, but the amount of content that you need to do to be ever present across every platform that there is, it is a full-time job. But if you have something like a long form piece of content you do every month, whether it be a YouTube show or just an audio podcast, you can duplicate that piece of content out and make minor adjustments. That piece of audio file can become a blog. That blog can feed into being your lead magnets, which feed landing pages on your website. It gives you some of your social media content. It's just the amount of duplication you can do and the lift you get off of it. I really do think it's a strong thing to add into your business because you're going to be doing all these other things anyways. So
Yep.
focus in on that long form piece of content. Uh,
Yep.
and
Is
and the,
Go
Go ahead.
ahead. You had one more point. Go for it.
No, no. Well, the other thing you said was talking about pay to play. You know,
Yeah.
I've helped a ton of clients run Facebook ads or Google ads, which are great, but if you don't have any of the content then behind it, if those people don't convert then in the moment, like they're gone forever. You just spent a bunch of ad dollars on them. So I love that your guys' approach has always been organic, real content. And then if you want to throw gas on the fire with ad dollars, you've
Right.
got the infrastructure behind it where that makes sense, and you can convert those people that fall through the landing page on
Yep.
click number one.
That's a great point. Like, you got to be patient. You got to give yourself grace. And it is a slower route to take for organic growth because it does take, it could be a full-time job if you let it. And for most of us, it's not our full-time job. So that's a great way to wrap us up. If you are interested in exploring some of these various platforms, podcast included, other ways of recording and promoting your business, Model FA is a fantastic resource. Go check them out at modelfa.com. Ask for Graham. I couldn't say enough wonderful things about working with Graham. It's been fantastic. And to any of our listeners who are not RIAs, but just our listeners, we're open for new topics and ways to evolve this podcast. We always want to be getting better. So feel free to subscribe, send us your information, or hey, if you want to be a guest on our podcast, Building Wealthy Habits, we would love to have you. So reach out, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for having me. It was great being here.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordatvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordatvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.